A legend of urban horror is El Silbón. This narrative takes place in 1980 in the lovely South American community of Los Leones, where there are lots of fields and vegetation. A child named Maso was spending the holidays at his uncle's house in one of those fields. Everyone went to bed after dinner because the villagers used to go to bed early. Maso was unable to fall asleep while lying in bed. He continued to gaze at the ceiling fan until he heard loud animal noises. He came out and found that the noise was coming from a neighboring animal shelter that housed a large number of cows. When Maso looked up, he realized that there were heavy clouds in the sky. He proceeded to transfer the cows inside the barn because he believed they could be afraid of the approaching storm. However, he had never encountered cows so furious that he found it quite challenging to lead them inside. Maso was able to move a few cows into the barn as the rain started to pour, but as he did, he started to smell a foul stench like decaying meat. The fragrance intensified as the number of cows in the barn reduced. He noticed a bloody ancient cow's bones on the ground when there were just 5 or 6 cows remaining. Maso shouted and froze in horror, but before he could get away or take any action, he heard a frightful whistling in the distance. The sound was so eerie that it made him feel as though he was going to die, and he recognized it as El Silbón's whistle. El Silbón was the subject of numerous tales that Maso had heard. He thought about the tale his family had told him about a guy who had met El Silbón. The tale goes that this man was riding his horse through a vast empty field late at night when the animal tripped on something. The man spotted the bones of a deer, still dangling with bits of flesh after dismounting. He heard a whistle pierce the air before he could comprehend it. It was too late when he attempted to hoist his horse. Unexpectedly, a big figure leaped onto him after he heard a disturbance coming from a nearby tree. The man was killed when a bone struck his skull during his attempt to flee. A terrifying person, 19 feet tall and hat-wearing, with a monstrous-looking face and physique, stood in front of him. In order to beat the man to death, the figure, who went by the name El Silbón, took bones out of a bag full of them. The man's cries for assistance were in vain. As El Silbón consumed his flesh, his body was ripped apart. The man's body had been eaten, and the villagers discovered just his skeleton the following morning. The 19-foot-tall skeleton-like figure, known as El Silbón, was thought to still haunt the area. The ground trembled as Maso remembered these tales, and a shadow of a person higher than any tree materialized in front of him. A gigantic figure with ripped flesh all over his body, and a straw hat appeared out of this shadow. As the sound of bones clattering increased in volume, Maso recognized that this was El Silbón, now standing before him with a blood-soaked bag. Silbón chased after Maso as he fled, jumping from tree to tree. El Silbón was about to attack when a dog began to yelp loudly. El Silbón was startled by the barking and disappeared into thin air. Maso recognized that if his dog hadn't been there to save him, he would have been another victim, and his bones would have been put to El Silbón's bag. El Silbón was on Maso's mind constantly after that night. Even more horrifying was what he learned about the tradition from his relatives and the villagers. They said that El Silbón's tale was authentic, and that it started in the 18th century with a pampered youngster who lived nearby with his family. The youngster once requested that his father bring some deer meat back for supper. His father went hunting, but the youngster got upset when Dad didn't come back for a while. His mother dispatched him to find his father and gave him a dagger for protection. Instead of bringing his father back, the youngster brought a bag full of bones, organs, and bits of meat. His mother became skeptical after the youngster informed her it was deer flesh. The boy's grandfather chose to beat the truth out of him when the mother confided in him. The youngster said that he had murdered his father, dismembered his body, and taken the fragments home. The youngster was taken outside by the horrified grandfather, who chained him to a tree and thrashed him till bits of flesh dangled from his body. After that, he banished the boy into the forest where he was cursed for all eternity and covered his shoulders with his father's remains. His spirit became El Silbón after that day, and he began to wander the area while hauntingly whistling from the trees. Anyone who wanders the fields at night is said to run into El Silbón and be attacked like a beast. But every home in the neighborhood has dogs, because he is afraid of them. That night, Maso was saved by his dog. Otherwise, El Silbón would have claimed him as a victim as well. Remember to subscribe if you like this urban horror legend of El Silbón.